Introduction to Critical Sports Studies. Deviance in sports. Is it out of control? Media stories about drug use, on-the-field rule violations, off-the-field criminal actions are so common today that deviance is seen by many as out of control in sport. Defining and studying deviance in sport. Well, first we need to know, what is deviance? Deviance occurs when a person's ideas, traits, or actions are perceived by others to fall outside the normal range of acceptance in society. It's important to understand, though, that who are the others that are determining what is deviant. What might be deviant in sport may be criminal off the field, whereas something that might actually be criminal or deviant off the field might actually be common play in sport. So there's formal deviance, violations of official rules and laws that are punished by official sanctions administered by people in positions of authority, and the informal deviance, violations of unwritten customs and shared understandings that are punished by unofficial sanctions administered by observers or peers, sometimes just socially banned. Defining and studying deviance in sport. Well, understanding deviance requires an understanding of norms. Norm, the shared expectation that people use to identify what is acceptable and unacceptable in a social world. Formal norms, official expectations that take the form of written rules or laws. And then informal norms, customs or unwritten, shared understandings of how a person is expected to think, appear, and act in a social world. Problems faced when studying deviance in sport? Well, first, types and causes of deviance are diverse. What I mean by diverse, there are many different examples. Something that is deviant in, say, something that might be deviant in soccer might not be deviant in American football. Actions accepted in sports may be deviant in other situations. Training and performance are now based on such new forms of science and technology that people haven't had time to develop new norms to guide and regulate the actions of people in sports. So assault and battery or sport, who decides? If anyone's played football and a loose ball, a fumble occurs, there's the scramble for it, the basically referred to as the dog pile that exists on top of that ball. The things that happen within that scrum would not normally be accepted in regular society, in everyday society, yet largely accepted as what you need to do to gain possession of that ball. So there are two approaches to studying deviance. There's the absolutist approach and the constructionist approach. The absolutist approach assumes that social norms are based on essential principles that constitute an unchanging foundation for identifying good and evil and distinguishing right from wrong. So this approach is based on three assumptions. Norms represent social and moral ideals. Any departure from the ideal constitutes deviance. And the greater the departure from the ideal, the more serious the deviance. The second approach, the constructionist approach, is that deviance occurs when ideas, traits, and actions fall outside of socially determined boundaries that people use to determine what is acceptable and unacceptable in a social world. This approach is based on four assumptions. Norms are socially constructed. Deviance is socially constructed as people negotiate the boundaries of their acceptance. Power dynamics influence this negotiation. And most ideas, traits, and actions fall into normally accepted ranges. That range might be minor violations to major violations, and the degree of deviance falls in between that spectrum. Using a constructionist approach to explain deviance in sports, most deviance in sports is not due to the moral bankruptcy of athletes, as inferred to by the absolutist approach. The absolutist approach might say, wow, those players, just a bunch of thugs, using a term like that to group everyone who participates in a certain way as part of this deviant group. Much deviance in sports involves overconformity to established norms in sports. This is at the foundation of the constructionist approach. Not that any individual is morally bankrupt, but that they're actually overconforming to these established norms of violence in a particular sport. The sport ethic. An interrelated set of norms or standards that are used to guide and evaluate ideas, traits, and actions in the social worlds created around power and performance sports. Deviance in sports occurs in both sides of normal. Under conformity, deviance based on ignoring or rejecting norms involved subnormal actions, and in extreme cases can lead to anarchy. You can see this in society as well. Underconformity can lead to anarchy, where overconformity can lead to fascism. You can use the same spectrum when discussing sport, and normal accepted ranges are somewhere in the middle. In this figure, the four primary norms of sport ethic include dedication to the game, strive for distinction, accept no obstacle in the pursuit of success, accept risk and play through pain. So why do athletes engage in deviant overconformity? Athletes will do almost anything to stay involved. Being selected to play high-performance sports often requires overconformity to the norms of the sport ethic. And exceeding normative limits creates drama and excitement that leads to strong social bonds between athletes. Athletes most likely to overconform to the sport ethic, those with low self-esteem and a deep need to be accepted as athletes by their peers. Those who achievement in sport as their only way to gain success and respect. And those males who link their identities as athletes as men, so that an athlete and being a man become one and the same. Additional hypotheses about deviance among athletes. Deviance becomes more likely when social bonds among athletes normalize risk-taking. Athletes are separated from the rest of the community. Athletes develop extreme degrees of hubris. And people in the community see athletes as deserving special privilege because they engage in entertaining, even if dangerous and disabling, actions. So how to control deviant overconformity in sports? Learn to identify the forms and dynamics of overconformity among athletes and make coaches aware. Raise critical questions about the meaning, organization, and purpose of sports. Help athletes to learn how and when to set limits on their conformity to the norms of the sport ethic. Assist athletes to connect more meaningfully and deeply with people in the general community. Socialization is important. Socializing athletes, say on a college campus, with other students who are not athletes. Deviance by people other than athletes? Well, athletes are not the only ones in sports who engage in deviant behavior. Think of other examples involving coaches, administrators, team owners, referees, trainers, public officials, media people, agents, parents, spectators. Gambling and associated deviance. New digital technologies have enabled more people to gamble on more sports in more regions of the world than ever before. Heavy betting occurs in soccer with its more than 10,000 professional teams worldwide. High-stakes gamblers have tried to increase their odds of winning by making deals with athletes and referees. Most of these deals are very difficult to detect, except viewing betting patterns worldwide to detect patterns that may indicate when a fix is on. Organized crime is now involved in global sport gambling, and this increases dangers for rule enforcers. Hazing, another deviant part of sport. Is it deviant or is it team building? Well, hazing is a chronic issue at many levels of sports, and not just sport, but in other parts of society. People often confuse hazing, bullying, as rites of passage. It is difficult to obtain data on hazing. Like hazing on all teams, it is used by team veterans as a means of asserting power and control over new team members. Hazing on professional teams often involves forcing rookies to engage juvenile actions that place them in a subordinate position. So power is at the central core of hazing. Research on deviance among athletes. Off-the-field deviance, research shows that many athletes have lower rates of delinquency than similar peers who do not play sports. There are exceptions to this in the case of certain athletes, football players, and wrestlers in one study, who are more likely to engage in serious fights than other athletes. Sports programs do nothing to alter the social conditions associated with delinquency. Data on academic cheating is inconclusive. Membership in any tight-knit group is more important than simply playing sports when explaining cheating patterns. Data on rates of alcohol use and binge drinking are mixed. Drinking norms vary by the age of athletes and in the context in which they live, where they live at their dorms versus their parents or home. Binge drinking also is a problem in society as a whole. Felony rates among adult athletes do not seem to be out of control, but they are a serious problem. Age, race, ethnicity, and social class background must be taken into account when analyzing data. Sexual assault rates seem to be high and constitute a serious problem. Performance-enhancing substances, PESs, a case study of deviant overconformity. The use of PESs has a long history in sports, and it has been difficult to detect and control in every era. Coakley's conclusion is that substance use is not caused by defective socialization or a lack of moral character among athletes. Coakley would say that it usually occurs among the most dedicated, committed, and hardworking athletes. Most substance use and abuse is tied to an athlete's uncritical acceptance of the norms of the sport ethic. Therefore, it is grounded in overconformity to the norms of the sport ethic. Once again, this is not a morally bankrupt individual. This is someone who is grounded in overconformity to the norms of the sport ethic. Here you see Lance Armstrong completes a half triathlon with his daughters running with him to finish line. After his pro cycling career, he continued to train incessantly for marathons and triathlons, even though he had little chance of winning at his age, but his identity depended on it. Dietary supplements are not subject to government testing and approval before they are marketed and sold. Therefore, many of these dietary supplements are dangerous. This product may produce an intense sensation of focus, energy, and awareness. In addition, its key ingredients may allow for workout domination in conjunction with proper training and diet, but used with caution under strict dosing protocols. The negative side effects of various combinations of substances are more difficult to identify than this, but internally, what these substances are doing to someone's body can lead to long-term conditions such as cancer, chronic fatigue, and even death. So why has substance use become normalized in elite sports today? The visibility and resources associated with sports have fueled massive research and development efforts and increased the availability of substances. People are fascinated with technology and want to use it to push human limits. The rationalization of the body influences how people see the mind-body relationship. There's a growing emphasis on self-medication. Additionally, gender relations are changing and substances are used to change or preserve gender ideology. The Organization of Power and Performance Sports encourages overconformity to norms of the sport ethic. Coaches Coaches, sponsors, administrators, and fans encourage deviant over conformity. And athletes' performances are closely monitored with an emphasis on control over body and conformity to the demands of coaches. So arguments against testing. One thing that we examine here in critical sports studies is this pushback towards critically analyzing sport. Just as with testing of performance-enhancing substances, there are arguments against testing. Testing should be dropped because athletes remain one step ahead of the testers, making tests ineffective. You can see this with the Olympic Games. Athletes 4 to 8 years following the Olympic Games are oftentimes stripped of medals because of new technology testing for substances and testing their samples that they contributed voluntarily prior to the games that they participated in. Testing violates privacy rights. Testing drains valuable sport resources. Testing can't detect all performance-enhancing substances. Testing encourages athletes to seek other technologies such as genetic engineering. So, controlling substance use, where do we start? Critically examine the hypocrisy in elite sports. Establish rules indicating that risks to health are undesirable and unnecessary in sports. Establish a harm reduction approach, disallowing athletes to play until they are certified as well by an independent medical expert. Establish injury and health education programs for athletes. And make drug education part of deviance and health education too. Critically examine values and norms in sports, redefine meaning of achievement, teach athletes to think critically, and provide accurate and current information to parents, coaches, and athletes.